is, and the last piece is just your involvement as a family and how that could look moving forward. And then the last piece is just answering questions. So it'll be fairly quick and easy on my end, and I'll spend most of my time just answering questions that you all may have specific to your needs. All right, so one of the things with COVID-19, especially as it pertains to just my role as being a principal, it has definitely changed the scope of education and how things look. And how things look. So I know for a fact, I will say that coming into the pandemic, the job of an administrator looked one way, and it has changed dramatically. I would say every month as to what my role looks like. So I'll explain that more a little bit later on. But the biggest piece is we talk about with that quarantining, that physical distancing and masks. I know a lot of you all may have students that are in school, and you know that the school is contacting you because we have to ask kids to quarantine if they are in contact with someone with COVID-19. So a large part of what I do daily is making sure that our kids are safe and they're healthy, and also helping to sometimes do some contact tracing, which is another layer of my job now. And with that contact tracing, a lot of times is what explaining to most parents is that with quarantining, we are doing that, at least in our school system, basically to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of the kids and making sure they're safe. It does not always mean that a child has COVID. It just means that a child has either been around someone and they could have symptoms, or there's some suspicion involved. And so to make sure that we're safe for everyone, the best option for us that we're doing in the school system right now is quarantining our students. Although we are focusing primarily on in-person learning, that's just the method that we have to do now based off of COVID-19. And I think that most time when parents understand the quarantining piece of it and we explain to them how that looks, they are able to navigate it more. But there is probably, I would just say, one of the major pieces that we are dealing with, especially in the area of administration, is really explaining that process with our parents. But the good thing is we do have school nurses on site in my division, so they do help us to navigate that. Another impact of COVID-19 we're seeing is that social emotional learning. I think that we've all been impacted in some capacity as it relates to COVID-19 and how it has limited the amount of interactions we've been able to have with one another, be it if going to church, socializing with family, going into events. So we do see that there is a transition piece that has to work with our kids. And so, we have to make sure that we're taking those things into consideration and that we're also meeting the needs of our students as far as social emotional learning and actually having them to talk about their feelings. I would say that now more so than ever before, mental health is definitely at the top of the list of things that we are focusing on in the school system, and that people are more open and willing to express and explore their thoughts and their feelings with one another. I would say, if anything, that has definitely been a significant positive impact of things, that we're willing to actually sit down and have these discussions with one another. And then, of course, academics has been impacted. Research has shown that students have performed better with being in person. However, there have been gains that students who've chosen to stay online and attend school, and families to put their kids online, that they've also been able to make gains. So I don't like to think of it as a global, like all kids did not do well with online learning, because that's not necessarily true. There have been benefits, and actually I've actually seen an increase in parent participation with us being able to have more online programs now, because people can attend things from the comfort of their own home. They don't have to arrange childcare. And so I would say that for my events, especially like my parent teacher PTO event that at my school, we've had over like 40 people represented at that event. So we've definitely seen an increase as it relates to how we're able to access and build relationships with people beyond that standard form. And then the last piece of just for impacts of COVID-19 that we're seeing in the school system is just that we're able to repurpose and refocus. We found that with learning, learning can be more targeted. we are now in a high age of high interest for our kids. They're overly stimulated or very much so stimulated all the time. So it has definitely revolutionized how we think about education and how we think about going about it with our kids. So I would say that those are the significant impacts of COVID-19 that I personally have been seeing in the school system as it relates to just academics, the timeliness of it all, and also just being able to maintain attention in the focus and maintaining attention and focus with kids, because they are having to learn those social skills now because of that gap of time for 2 years, only being able to interact with a fixed group of people. So it's just taking them to kind of go through that process and be resilient with adapting. So kids are more resilient than we tend to give them credit for. And they adapt much faster than we do. So I think that's the biggest thing that I want to make sure that I emphasize as a takeaway, is that remember that, a child will adapt and reconfigure much faster than we. It tends to be sometimes us and how our thinking about things are that sometimes prevents, or not, I won't say prevents, but could limit that transitional period for our students. So I don't know. I can pause there for a second, Sharika, because that was a mouthful of things. To see if anyone had any questions about that.
We do have two separate people asking questions in the chat. The first one is, the transition is tough. What challenges have to face at your school in particular? I think you just went over that. And did you have to address school bus shortages?
Oh, great question. So actually, let me delve in deeper with that transition for my school in particular. So one of the things that we're definitely impacted, and this was something not just in my school, but actually all the schools in the division, arrival and dismissal. We didn't realize that it has been 2 years since people had, at least in a mass, had come to school and picked up. So when it was like people were, it was literally like starting a new school with new people. And so keep into context, for my school, we have 900 plus kids like in our school in a very small space. So 200 people come into school and they haven't really gone through the structure of, this is how you come into the school, this is how you navigate the car ride system. That was intense on the first day. Yeah, that was intense. I'm just going to keep it honest with you all. Sharika, you have us recorded, so I just make sure I'm mindful of that. But that was intense the first day, where I'm like looking at one point in time, I was like, oh, wow, look at all this. So that is the biggest piece. Also getting kids into a routine, like that routine piece, like they hadn't, it's different. You're learning at home for almost 2 years. You got your laptop, you're laying on the floor. You're getting a snack when you want. Like, you're actually asking people to get on a schedule and get on a schedule for 7 hours straight. And not just kids. Now, we're talking about teachers and families. So like that was another big piece. And then also the big piece with families. We love involvement with families. But I think that with being online, families start to be able to see things live and get everything right then and there, and information came quick. But with in person, everyone's not as accessible that fast. Like I'm not like in Zoom where you can see me right quick, or you can see what's happening live time. So we have to train people or get people used to reacquainting them with that process that takes for us to respond. Like, hey, we have 25 kids in front of us now. So we're not able to get right to you right in the moment. So those are some of the big pieces of it. And then just that with also like, from a school perspective, like I said, refocus and repurpose, learning looks different now. Kids are coming to you with different needs. So like we're not going back to learning how it was. We're going back to a new type of learning. Like we will never get back to what it was. So I would say that's the biggest piece. Now the transportation one, yeah, we're feeling that one. That's the real answer to that one. Honestly, yeah, we felt transportation concerns for a long time. The bus shortage is definitely an intense process. It does take them longer to get the students because we don't have that many people that are driving the bus right now. But that has definitely been something that we've experienced at my school and at the division as a whole, every school.
Awesome. The next question is, as a parent, it was difficult with the virtual learning at high school level. What advice or tips can you give to help better transition students into virtual learning so they can be equally as successful at home as they are in school?
So one of the things was just um, with learning is really making sure you establish a schedule with your child. Building a routine, building a structure, and not just a schedule or intuitively they know it, but like visually they can see from this time to this time, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. So like you build it, kids thrive off of routine and structure. Like it has to be something that's consistent. So actually working to develop a routine schedule if your child is online, to develop that with them so that they can maintain some type of structure in their environment so they can continue to thrive.
Yep. And I think that's the last one, George.
Okay, that was the last question.
Yep.
All right, so I'll start talking about. I'm going to talk a little bit about some like unfinished learning pieces, and then we'll go from there. So one of the another thing that we're always talking about is that unfinished learning. This like kids need to know more. Kids and that. I want to take it from a perspective of just at home, and understanding that a lot of the things that you do at home are very impactful and empower kids. And so one of the things, just as simple as like cooking with your child. There are a lot of skills that are involved with you cooking with your child, taking the time to measure using the tools like measurement tools, 1/4 cup, 1/8 cup of this. You're teaching your child fractions. You're teaching your child how to estimate. You're teaching your child measurements. If you don't have a 1/4 cup, what are you going to do? If your recipe calls for 1/4 and you only have a 1/8 cup, well, you would take 2 of those 8s and you would make that 1/4. So like those are simple things that we tend to do all the time as a community, that we never really understand the true impact of it and to how to think critically about information. So like I want to make sure that I emphasize that the power of just having conversations and doing things with kids are a part of that learning process. So I want to make sure that you are taking advantage of that. And then also the conversations that you have with kids help to build academic vocabulary. So if you're speaking to your child, the language that you're addressing your child and you're describing, especially the little ones, hey, do you see the big blue, whatever, or whatever it is, and you're using that, you're building vocabulary and you're enriching your child. These are things that are very simple that I see parents do, a lot of parents that do all the time. And some parents are not aware of that. If you just have these type of conversations with your children, that helps to build a vocabulary, and just reading to them. Reading anything and everything, children books, reading to them, letting them read to you, reading to other people, getting up if you're at a church event to speak at those different events. Those are all things that impact their academic performance that we sometimes don't understand that true magnitude. And even, well, we don't pay as much for things with cash anymore, but just tallying up things in the store and having an idea what they're spending. Those are all basic skills that are very meaningful that we actually just put a standard to in the classroom. So a lot of things that we're doing, I just want to make sure that we say in our community that if you think about it or you ask your teachers about it, they will be able to tell you that it's connected. So with unfinished learning, that's the biggest thing that we're always talking about. That, oh, kids need to learn this. Well, kids did learn something over the pandemic. They have been able to manage themselves in some capacity. So what can we look at what they have been able to do? And then how can we associate the learning to that so they can move forward? So I think just making sure that we're thinking of our kids in a sense of not that they don't have anything or not that their learning is limited or stifled, but their learning is here and we're able to go to the next level with it. So just definitely make sure you're holding discussions with your child about things and asking them to clarify things when you don't understand, not just, brushing off conversations when, kids say things, it's like, what are you even saying? And you brush it off, but like actually like, no, what do you mean when you say that? And you're challenging them to think about information that they're putting out there. So I would just say, I wanted to make sure that I just highlight those things as very simplistic, but impactful things that could really support a child's learning, especially when we talk about unfinished learning and accelerating their learning.
Okay, we have a question in the comment section. Do you feel that preparing kids for SOLs has taken away from the basic learning and life skills kids need?
So this is one of those questions, right? Um, I would say that the way that we have chosen to think about SOLs, probably I could see how that could contribute to that. Um, I would say that if we reframe our thinking around SOLs and the purpose of them for us to actually use those to get information about our children and as to what they are learning, what they have mastered, and what they still need to learn, then we don't think of it more of a sense of, I don't want to use the summative word, that's a lingo, but we don't look at it as it more of a final, like, this is what they are. Like no one is completely who they are after one test. Like that's just where they are at that moment, and they can still go from it. So I will say that I think that we can definitely reframe the way that we think about SOL tests to think of them more of a benchmark to where they are growth wise, to see what they've been able to capture thus far, and then we can use those things to determine what the next steps are. That's the true thinking behind it. I do think that if not approached that way, it does limit that critical thinking and those life skills. And honestly speaking, life skills are very important. Good old common sense helps kids out with their instruction, helps kids out with, living day to day. But I would just say that for that particular question, that it's just all about how we're looking at it. I would say that the way that we look at a SOL test in particular are what possibly limits the true potential that our kids are able to demonstrate and reflect, because every mastery does not always look in the form of a test. Some people can put together and build things, but they may not be able to take a good test. And you have people who could take a good test well and can't build you one thing.
Okay, the next question is, they have learned there were two different approaches to virtual learning. Some teachers were actually on Zooms, and some teachers actually relied on learning applications to teach the children. Do you think one approach is better than the other?
Can you repeat that question again for me?
Let's see. They have learned there were two different approaches to virtual learning. Some teachers were actually on Zooms, and some teachers actually relied on learning applications to teach the children. Do you think one approach is better than the other?
No, I don't think one is better than the other. I think that it honestly just is. It's mostly just about how they're servicing the student and how the students are interacting with whatever platform is available to them.
Okay. And I think that was all the questions in the chat.
Oh, okay. All right. So I guess the last piece I just had then, we're just talking about involvement with families right now for everyone. I just want to encourage, because this has been a transition, that I want to make sure that I just encourage everyone to, definitely build a rapport, with your child's teacher. That person is going to be instrumental with helping you to navigate what the appropriate next steps are for your child. I cannot emphasize that enough. A lot of the important life decisions happen in the classroom and really influence the trajectory of where our kids are going to go in life. And I know a lot of times we focus more on those, effects, but that root, like education, is where all of those big decisions happen with kids and really helping them to mold themselves for their future. Because these kids spend a significant amount of time at school with us around academia and life skill type of things. So I want to make sure that I empower everyone to understand, to be involved with that child's teacher, be involved with that child's education. Ask questions. If you don't understand, ask questions. What does that mean? I do not care if you are at a building or a space where they, will give you attitude. They can wait. Let them give you attitude. That's fine. You can correct it afterwards. But ask the questions that you need clarification for. You need to know what's happening with your child. Reading levels. What does reading level mean? Ask them. Okay. What are the goals that you have for my child? And whatever specific, what are my child's goals in reading, or what are my child's goals in math this year? Where are they performing? If you're noticing something at home with your child and you have just tell the teacher or whomever, I noticed this is going on with my child at home. What does this mean? This is what I'm noticing, or I'm trying to do this. I notice they do this. So ask questions about whatever it is. Again, I know personally, as a teacher and as a former teacher and as a principal, I actually like it when parents ask questions, because it then challenges us to think deeper about that child, and it really helps that child to get more resources. So ask questions, but of course you're building that rapport as a respectful relationship with your teachers. So that will be fine. And then also make sure that you understand that we are in a pandemic, and just like how you are experiencing the pandemic, the way that you're experiencing it, someone else is as well. So yeah, we're in the buildings and we're teaching and we're doing all these other stuff, but outside of that, these are real people with real lives. So they also have impacts as well. We are dealing with a teacher shortage right now. That will probably, honestly, is one of the biggest things I have to deal with too, outside of COVID, is making sure that we're helping to navigate that teacher shortage and making sure that we have a trained or a capable individual in front of every student so that they can continue to grow and not be impacted by not only the pandemic, but also the lack of availability of professional employees. So those are the big things. And then just keeping in mind that, there has been a lot of civil and unjust and unrest that has happened. So with that mental piece and that mental health, we have really dealt with and are dealing with a lot. And so I think that as a family, it's great to have conversations with these things about with your children at home, because everyone is being impacted, the racism, ageism, all those things you can name it have been kind of in the pot that these kids have been dealing with, as well as you, over the course of this time, as well as being able to try to maintain their learning. So that is some significant stuff, and it's very heavy.
All right, George, I'm gonna have to get you back on. I know we kind of had the was that it of your PowerPoint? I'm sorry.
That was it.
Okay, good. I'm gonna have to get you back on because I know I said I had another meeting after this. Because you did an awesome job, and I'm sure we have other questions and other parents, but they're probably in my other meeting right now. Mm-hmm. So I thank you so much. You want to let the people know where they can reach you if they have any questions as far as the schooling or anything?
Yeah, if you have questions, definitely. I'm on Facebook. You can do that. I'm not really good with the chat, you all. I'm be honest with you all, but if you put it in there, I'll get to it eventually. But you can always email me too at gwright191@yahoo. That's my personal email, and I'll see the emails through that as well. So definitely reach out to me through a Facebook chat. Whomever, Sharika, whomever else that is connected with me, Facebook will also help find me.
You may want to keep that Facebook. You don't want them blowing up your stuff. I'm just playing.
Oh.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining. And this wraps up our topic for the month, which is back to school. And we will see you on next month. Thank you so much, George.
Thank you. See you, everyone.